A man is chained for a crime he swears he didn't commit. The townspeople are ready to hang him. But one young woman sees what no one else is willing to believe, and what she finds could tear the whole town apart. Thank you so much for watching. And for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked this story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. In the dusty town of Broken Ridge, 1875, the summer heat hung heavy over the plains of Texas. The settlement, barely 10 years old, sat uneasily at the edge of Comanche territory, a testament to the uneasy peace that had settled across the frontier. Thunder Cloud, a young Comanche warrior known among his people for his fairness and skill with horses, found himself dragged into town by 3 men on horseback. His hands were bound, his face bruised, and his spirit defiant as they hauled him toward the jailhouse. Sheriff Thomas Miller, a man who'd seen enough violence to last several lifetimes, watched from the porch of his office. The crowd began to gather, their whispers carrying accusations through the hot afternoon air. "Found him near the Wilkins place," announced Jeb Crawford, the lead writer. "Fresh after the robbery. Gold's missing, and Old Man Wilkins is barely breathing." Thunder Cloud's dark eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "I found the white man already wounded. I was trying to help." "Save it, Indian," spat Crawford, shoving him forward. "We all know your kind." Sheriff Miller sighed, his weathered face revealing little emotion. At 55, he'd spent the last 15 years trying to keep the peace in a land where peace was as scarce as rain. "Take him inside," he ordered, gesturing toward the jailhouse. "And Crawford, tell your boys to disperse this crowd. Last thing we need is talk of a lynching." Inside the small jailhouse with its 2 cells and sparse furnishings, Sheriff Miller studied the Comanche prisoner. Thunder Cloud stood tall despite his bonds, his lean frame betraying no fear. "You speak good English," Miller noted, removing the ropes from his wrists, only to replace them with iron shackles attached to the cell wall. "The missionaries taught me," Thunder Cloud replied simply. "I did not harm the white settler." Miller nodded, not committing either way. "Trial's in 3 days, Judge Preston rides through then." He locked the cell door. "Until then, you stay put." As evening fell, the sheriff's daughter, Catherine Miller, arrived with a tray of food. At 22, she had her father's quiet strength and her late mother's gentle eyes. She'd been raised on the frontier, educated from books her father ordered from back east, and possessed a sense of justice that sometimes put her at odds with the town's sentiments. "Father, I've brought supper," she called, setting down the tray on his desk. Her eyes drifted to the cell where Thunder Cloud sat motionless. "That's the Comanche they're saying attacked Mr. Wilkins?" she asked softly. Sheriff Miller nodded. "That's what they're saying. And what do you think?" Catherine pressed. Her father looked up from his paperwork. "Doesn't matter what I think. Law says he gets a trial." Catherine approached the cell cautiously. Thunder Cloud looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers without hostility. "You must be hungry," she said, sliding a plate through the small opening in the cell door. Thunder Cloud hesitated before taking the food. "Thank you," he said simply. Catherine watched him for a moment. "Did you do it?" she asked suddenly, earning a sharp look from her father. "Catherine," Sheriff Miller warned. "No," Thunder Cloud answered, his voice steady. "I was hunting when I heard a shot. I found the man bleeding. I tried to stop the blood with my hands." He looked down at his stained hands. "Then those riders came." Catherine held his gaze, searching for truth. Something in his unwavering stare made her believe him. "Catherine, enough," her father interrupted. "Go on home now. I'll be along shortly." Later that night, as Catherine prepared for bed in their small house at the edge of town, she couldn't shake the Comanche's face from her mind. Her father entered, removing his hat and badge with a heavy sigh. "You shouldn't talk to prisoners like that," he said, settling into his chair by the fireplace. "I don't think he did it," Catherine replied. "He doesn't have the look of a liar." Sheriff Miller rubbed his forehead. "It doesn't matter. The town's already decided he's guilty. Crawford's been talking all over, saying they caught him red-handed." "And you believe Jeb Crawford?" Catherine asked incredulously. "The same man who tried to cheat the Hernandez family out of their land claim last year." "What I believe doesn't change the facts," her father countered. There's a wounded man missing gold and a Comanche found at the scene. Judge Preston isn't known for his sympathy toward Indians. Catherine turned away, looking out the window. Toward the distant hills. It's not right. Few things are in this world, her father replied softly. Get some sleep. But sleep eluded Catherine that night. She tossed and turned, haunted by the thought of an innocent man hanging for a crime he didn't commit. By morning, she had made up her mind to learn more. The next day, while her father was busy with his rounds, Catherine went to visit Martha Wilkins at her father's homestead. The small farmhouse was quiet, with neighbors taking turns sitting with the injured man. How is he? Catherine asked as Martha welcomed her inside. Still unconscious, Martha replied, her eyes red from crying. Doctor says if he wakes at all, it'll be a miracle. Catherine placed a comforting hand on the woman's arm. I'm so sorry, Martha. I brought some bread and preserves. As they sat at the kitchen table, Catherine carefully broached the subject. Has your father been able to say anything about what happened? Martha shook her head. Nothing. He was found by the creek where he keeps the strongbox. It was empty. Her voice hardened. That savage took everything we had saved. Catherine chose her words carefully. The Comanche claims he found your father already wounded. That he was trying to help. Martha's expression darkened. Of course. He'd say that. Indians are known liars. She dabbed at her eyes. Jeb and his men saw him there, hands covered in blood. Jeb Crawford? Catherine asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. He's the one who found your father? He and his men were riding by our property, Martha explained. They heard a shot and investigated. Found that Indian standing over the strongbox open beside him. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. I see. And did they mention seeing anyone else in the area? Martha looked confused. Why would there be anyone else? They caught the culprit. As Catherine left the Wilkins farm, her suspicions only grew stronger. She decided to visit the scene of the crime herself. Riding her mare along the creek that bordered the Wilkins property, she found the spot easily enough. Dried blood still stained the rocky ground near the water. Catherine dismounted, examining the area carefully. Something caught her eye, a small piece of fabric caught on a thorny bush nearby. It was too fine to belong to a Comanche, who typically wore buckskin or simple cotton. This was a piece of patterned Westcott material, the kind worn by TOWNSMEN. Her heart racing, Catherine tucked the fabric into her pocket and continued searching. Near a cluster of rocks, she found several boot prints, different from the moccasin tracks that would have been left by Thundercloud. Following them, she discovered they led not toward the Comanche territory, but back toward town. As the sun began to set, Catherine hurried back to Broken Ridge, her mind working furiously. She had a theory forming, but she needed more evidence before she could approach her father. And time was running out for Thundercloud. Back in town, she noticed Jeb Crawford and his friends drinking outside the saloon. Crawford's loud voice carried across the street. Come tomorrow night, we might just save the town the trouble of a trial, he boasted. Indians need to learn they can't just come onto our land and take what they want. Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. They were planning to lynch Thundercloud, and with the judge not due until the following evening, there would be no justice if they succeeded. She hurried to the jailhouse, finding her father preparing for his night watch. There's talk of a lynching, she said without preamble. Sheriff Miller's expression darkened. Crawford? Catherine nodded. Tomorrow night. Father, I don't think Thundercloud is guilty. I found something at the creek. I don't want to hear it, her father interrupted. And I don't want you investigating this matter further. It's dangerous, Catherine. But, no buts, he said firmly. I'll handle Crawford and his men. You stay away from this. Catherine bit her lip, knowing argument was futile. But as she left the jailhouse, she glanced back at Thundercloud, who sat silently watching her from his cell. Their eyes met briefly. And in that moment, she made her decision. With or without her father's help, she would uncover the truth. As night fell over Broken Ridge, Catherine's resolve only strengthened. Justice demanded nothing less, even if it meant defying her father and the entire town. The morning brought an unusual stir to Broken Ridge. Catherine Miller rose early, her mind set on a dangerous plan that had kept her awake most of the night. She dressed carefully, choosing practical clothes that wouldn't draw attention, and slipped her father's spare pistol into her pocket. She had fired it only a handful of times during practice, but its weight gave her courage. Sheriff Miller had left before dawn to check on the Wilkins homestead, leaving Deputy Frank Simmons to guard the jailhouse. Catherine knew Frank well. He was young, easily distracted, and harbored a poorly concealed admiration for her that made him malleable to her requests. The streets were relatively quiet as she made her way to Jeb Crawford's boarding house. She knew he rented a room above the general store, and at this hour, he was likely still sleeping off last night's whiskey. Catherine moved quietly up the back stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. This was reckless, perhaps even foolish. But she couldn't shake the conviction that Thundercloud was innocent. Crawford's door was unlocked. Few in Broken Ridge bothered with locks. Catherine slipped inside, holding her breath as she saw Crawford's large form sprawled across the bed, snoring loudly. The small room reeked of tobacco and unwashed clothes. Catherine's eyes scanned the space, looking for anything that might connect Crawford to the Wilkins robbery. A saddlebag lay carelessly tossed in the corner. Moving silently, Catherine knelt beside it and carefully opened the flap. Inside, she found a few personal items, ammunition, and then her breath caught a small leather pouch. Opening it revealed several gold coins and a folded piece of paper. That looked like a banknote. "My God," she whispered. This had to be part of the Wilkins savings. A floorboard creaked beneath her foot as she shifted position. Crawford stirred, mumbling in his sleep. Catherine froze, her hand instinctively moving to the pistol in her pocket. After a moment, Crawford's snoring resumed, and she carefully replaced the pouch, memorizing its position. As she turned to leave, something caught her eye, a waistcoat hanging on a hook by the door. It was missing a small piece from its edge. With trembling fingers, Catherine withdrew the fabric scrap she'd found by the creek. A perfect match. She'd seen enough. Slipping out as quietly as she'd entered, Catherine hurried toward the jailhouse, her mind racing. She had proof now, or at least enough to cast serious doubt on Thundercloud's guilt. But would it be enough to convince her father? To save the Comanche from the noose, or worse, from Crawford's lynch mob? At the jailhouse, Deputy Simmons looked up in surprise as she burst through the door. "Miss Catherine? Everything all right?" Catherine composed herself, offering a smile. "Yes, Frank, I've brought breakfast for the prisoner." She held up a basket she'd prepared earlier. "Father asked me to check on things while he's at the Wilkins place." Frank hesitated. "The sheriff didn't mention. It was a last-minute decision," Catherine interrupted smoothly. "You know how he worries about proper meals for the prisoners. Even Indians." After a moment, Frank nodded. "I suppose that's fine. I was just about to get some coffee from the hotel." "Been up all night. Perfect timing then," Catherine said brightly. "You go ahead. I'll wait here until you return." As soon as the deputy left, Catherine moved quickly to Thundercloud's cell. The Comanche warrior was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor, his back straight despite the heavy chain that secured him to the wall. "I don't have much time," Catherine said urgently. "I believe you're innocent." Thundercloud's expression remained impassive, but his eyes showed surprise. "Why would you believe an Indian over your own kind?" "Because I found evidence," she replied, glancing nervously at the door. "Jeb Crawford has gold from the Wilkins strongbox, and I found fabric from his waistcoat at the crime scene. I think he shot Mr. Wilkins and stole the money, then framed you when you happened upon the scene." A flicker of emotion crossed Thundercloud's face. "You risk much to help me." Catherine nodded. "Crawford is planning a lynching tonight. My father will try to stop it, but ... double quote." She didn't need to finish the thought. Both knew how these situations often ended in frontier towns. "Can you not tell your father what you found?" Thundercloud asked. "I will, but he's bound by law. Even with my evidence, he'll have to wait for the judge. And Crawford has friends, they won't wait for justice." Catherine's voice dropped to a whisper. "I need to get you out of here." Thundercloud's eyes widened slightly. "You would free me?" "They would hang you for such an act." "Not if we're careful," Catherine insisted. "My father keeps a spare key in his desk. Once you're free, you can escape to your people until I can convince my father of the truth." The Comanche warrior studied her face. Why would you risk everything for a stranger? For an Indian? Catherine met his gaze steadily. Because justice matters more than fear, more than prejudice. She hesitated. My mother taught me that before she died. She believed all men deserved fair treatment, regardless of the color of their skin. Thundercloud nodded slowly. Your mother was wise. After a moment, he added, if I escape, your people will blame all Comanche. It could bring war to my tribe. Catherine hadn't considered this. The town's anger would indeed be directed at all Comanche if Thundercloud escaped. Then we need more than an escape, she said thoughtfully. We need proof that cannot be denied. Just then, they heard footsteps approaching. Catherine quickly moved away from the cell, pretending to arrange food on a small table as Deputy Simmons returned. That was quick, Frank, she said, forcing a smile. Forgot my money, he replied, eyeing her suspiciously. Were you talking to the prisoner? Just telling him to eat while the food's warm, Catherine answered smoothly. I should be going now. Father will be expecting me. Throughout the day, Catherine's mind worked feverishly on a plan. She needed to gather more concrete evidence against Crawford before nightfall. The lynch mob would likely make their move after dark, and she had precious little time. Her opportunity came when she spotted Crawford and two of his friends, Mitch Dalton and Hank Peters, heading into the saloon in the late afternoon. Moving quickly, she returned to Crawford's room, this time with a clearer purpose. She found the pouch of gold again and, heart pounding, removed a single coin and the banknote. It wasn't stealing, she told herself, it was evidence. Examining the note more carefully, she saw it was a withdrawal receipt from the bank in the neighboring town of Copper Springs, made out to Arthur Wilkins for the sum of $50 dated just 3 days earlier. This had to be from the stolen money. Next, Catherine headed to the livery stable where Crawford kept his horse. The stable boy Tommy was sweeping the floor when she arrived. Afternoon, Miss Miller, he greeted her. Looking for your mare? Actually, Tommy, I was wondering about Mr. Crawford's horse, Catherine replied casually. Did he ride out to the Wilkins place the day Mr. Wilkins was shot? Tommy scratched his head. Yes'm, he did. Him and Mitch and Hank rode out early. Said they were hunting, but they came back all excited about catching that Indian. Did you notice anything unusual when they returned? The boy thought for a moment. Well, Mr. Crawford's saddlebag seemed heavier, and ... He lowered his voice. I saw blood on his sleeve. He said it was from helping Mr. Wilkins, but he was acting strange jumpy-like. Catherine thanked the boy and slipped him a penny for candy, swearing him to secrecy about their conversation. The pieces were falling into place, but she still needed a way to expose Crawford before the lynch mob gathered. As the sun began to set, Catherine made her decision. She would need to act boldly and quickly. She rushed home and wrote everything she had discovered in a letter, sealed it, and addressed it to Judge Preston. If anything happened to her, at least the truth would eventually come to light. She then headed to the jailhouse, finding her father had returned. Sheriff Miller looked exhausted, the lines on his face deeper than usual. Catherine, what are you doing here? I told you to stay home tonight. Father, I need to speak with you urgently, she said, her voice low but firm. It's about the Wilkins robbery, Sheriff Miller sighed heavily. I don't have time for this. Crawford's been stirring up half the town. I've sent for reinforcements from Fort Davis, but they won't arrive until tomorrow. That's why you need to hear me now, Catherine insisted. Jeb Crawford is the real criminal. He shot Mr. Wilkins and stole the money, then framed Thundercloud when he found him trying to help. Her father stared at her in disbelief. That's a serious accusation, Catherine. What possible proof could you have? Catherine produced the gold coin and banknote. I found these in Crawford's room. The note is from Mr. Wilkins' recent withdrawal. And Tommy at the livery saw blood on Crawford's sleeve when he returned that day. Sheriff Miller examined the items, his expression grave. Even if this is true, I can't arrest a man based on evidence obtained by my daughter breaking into his room. That's not how the law works. Then what about this? Catherine withdrew the fabric scrap. I found this at the creek where Mr. Wilkins was shot. It matches Crawford's waistcoat exactly. Her father took the fabric, turning it over in his fingers. This still isn't enough, Catherine, not for a court. It would be if Mr. Wilkins woke up and identified his attacker, Catherine argued. But he hasn't, Sheriff Miller replied wearily. And the doctor doesn't think he will. Catherine felt desperation rising within her. Then at least move Thundercloud somewhere safe until the judge arrives, please, Father. Sheriff Miller studied his daughter's face, seeing the determination in her eyes. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. I'll consider it, but for now you need to go home and stay there. But Catherine had no intention of going home. As darkness fell over Broken Ridge, she slipped behind the jailhouse, watching and waiting. Sure enough, as the town clock struck 9, she saw a group of men gathering near the saloon. Crawford was at their center, his voice carrying through the night air as he rallied his makeshift posse. Catherine knew her time had run out. She had to act now. Under the cover of darkness, Catherine made her way to the back entrance of the jailhouse. Her father had reinforced the front with Deputy Simmons and 2 other trusted men. Anticipating Crawford's mob would approach from Main Street, the rear door, accessible through a narrow alley, remained unguarded. Catherine's hands trembled as she withdrew the spare key she'd taken from her father's desk drawer earlier that day. The metal felt cold against her palm, a physical reminder of the line she was about to cross. Breaking a prisoner out of jail wasn't just dangerous, it was a crime that could land her behind bars, or worse. There's no other way, she whispered to herself, gathering her courage. The lock turned with a soft click, and Catherine slipped inside. The jailhouse was dimly lit by a single oil lamp, casting long shadows across the worn floorboards. She could hear muffled voices from the front room where her father was stationed. Moving silently, she approached Thundercloud's cell. The Comanche warrior was alert, already on his feet as if he'd been expecting her. His dark eyes reflected the lamplight as they met hers. You should not be here, he said softly. Crawford's mob is gathering, Catherine replied, her voice barely above a whisper. There's at least 15 men, and they've been drinking. My father can't hold them off for long. She withdrew another key, this one taken from the hook in her father's office. I'm going to release you. There's a horse waiting behind the blacksmith shop. You can ride north, follow the creek until you reach Comanche territory. Thundercloud shook his head slowly. If I run, it will only confirm my guilt in their eyes. The peace between my people and yours is fragile. This could spark a war. And if you stay, you'll die, Catherine argued, frustration edging into her voice. Is that what you want? What I want, Thundercloud replied calmly, is justice. True justice. Their conversation was interrupted by raised voices from the front of the jailhouse. Crawford's mob had arrived. Miller. Crawford's voice boomed through the night. Hand over the Indian. We know what needs doing. Catherine heard her father's measured response, though she couldn't make out the words. The tension in the air was palpable. We don't have time for this, she hissed, moving to unlock the cell door. Once they break through, wait, Thunder. Cloud interrupted. His expression was thoughtful. You said you have evidence against Crawford? Catherine nodded. Yes, but not enough. Not without Mr. Wilkins waking to identify him. Then perhaps we need Crawford to reveal himself, Thundercloud suggested. Among my people, a guilty man often betrays his own heart when pressed. Catherine stared at him, understanding dawning. You mean trick him into confessing? A commotion from the front room interrupted them, the sound of shattering glass and angry shouts. The mob was getting restless. Miller, you've got 5 minutes to hand him over, or we're coming in. Crawford yelled. Thunder. Cloud fixed Catherine with an intense gaze. Do you trust me? Yes, she answered without hesitation, surprising herself with the certainty she felt. Then let me face them, he said, but stay close. Catherine hesitated, then nodded, making a quick decision. Not chained to the wall. That's asking to be lynched. She unlocked his shackles, leaving him free within the cell. I'll be ready. She slipped back toward the front room, positioning herself in the shadows of the hallway where she could see and hear what transpired. Her father stood resolute before the jailhouse door, his shotgun held across his chest. Deputy Simmons and 2 local ranchers flanked him, creating a human barrier. Crawford stood on the porch, backed by a mob of angry townsmen. Many held torches, casting a hellish glow over the scene. Others carried rifles or ropes. "This isn't justice, Crawford," Sheriff Miller said firmly. "This is murder. The judge arrives tomorrow. The Indian will stand trial as the law requires." "The law?" Crawford spat. "The law doesn't apply to savages. That redskin murdered Wilkins for his gold, and we all know the judge will just ship him off to some reservation. That's not justice." Catherine watched her father's face harden. "No one's dead yet. Wilkins still lives." "Barely," shouted someone from the crowd. "Doc says he won't last the night. All the more reason to wait," Sheriff Miller argued. "If Wilkins dies, it's hanging for sure. But until then, while there's still a chance he might wake and tell us what happened, I won't let you take the law into your hands." Crawford's face contorted with rage. "Enough talk." He turned to the mob. "Boys, we're taking that Indian one way or another." The tension broke as several men surged forward. Sheriff Miller raised his shotgun, aiming it directly at Crawford's chest. "Take one more step, and I'll drop you where you stand, Jeb." The crowd hesitated, but Catherine could see the bloodlust in their eyes. It wouldn't take much to push them over the edge. She had to act now, stepping into the light. Catherine spoke clearly. "Mr. Crawford is very eager to see Thundercloud hang. Perhaps because he's afraid of what might happen if Mr. Wilkins wakes up." All eyes turned to her. Her father's expression flashed from shock to anger. "Catherine, get back inside." "No, father," she replied steadily. "These men deserve to know the truth." She held up the banknote and gold coin. "I found these in Mr. Crawford's room today. They're from the Wilkins strongbox." Crawford's face paled momentarily before flushing with anger. "That's a lie. She's making this up to protect that savage." "Am I?" Catherine countered. "Then how? Do you explain the piece of your waistcoat I found at the creek where Mr. Wilkins was shot? The same creek where you claim to have happened upon Thundercloud." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some men lowered their torches, uncertainty replacing their earlier conviction. "You little," Crawford started toward Catherine, only to be stopped by Sheriff Miller's shotgun pressing against his chest. "Careful, Jeb," the sheriff warned, his voice deadly quiet. "That's my daughter you're talking to." Crawford forced a laugh. "Are you all going to listen to a girl's wild stories? She's been soft on Indians since her mother filled her head with that Christian charity nonsense." "It's not just her word," came a new voice. All heads turned as Thundercloud emerged from the hallway, standing tall despite his recent captivity. "I saw you, Crawford. I was hunting when I heard the shot. I watched you shoot Wilkins from behind, take his gold, and run. I went to help the wounded man. That is when your friends found me." "He's loose," someone shouted. Several men raised their weapons. "Hold your fire," Sheriff Miller commanded. "He's unarmed." Crawford's eyes darted between Catherine, Thundercloud, and the increasingly uncertain mob. "He's lying. You'd take an Indian's word over mine?" "I would," came another voice from the back of the crowd. The men parted to reveal Dr. Reynolds, supporting a pale but conscious Arthur Wilkins. A collective gasp went through the gathering. Wilkins looked terrible, his face gray with pain. A bandage wrapped around his head, but his eyes were clear and fixed on Crawford with unmistakable recognition. "It was Jeb," Wilkins said, his voice weak but determined. "He shot me from behind. Thought I was dead, I reckon. Last thing I remember before blacking out was seeing that Indian boy trying to stop my bleeding." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Men who moments ago had been calling for Thundercloud's blood now turned accusatory stares toward Crawford. "You backstabbing snake," one of the ranchers growled. "Arthur Wilkins never did you harm." Crawford's hand inched toward his pistol. "You're all fools. Taking the word of a half-dead man and a savage." "Don't do it, Jeb," Sheriff Miller warned, his finger tightening on the trigger of his shotgun. For a moment, it seemed Crawford might draw anyway. Then, with the desperation of a cornered animal, he lunged sideways, grabbing Catherine and pulling her against him as a shield. His pistol pressed against her temple. "Drop the shotgun, Miller," Crawford demanded, "or your daughter gets a bullet in her brain." The crowd scattered, taking cover wherever they could find it. Sheriff Miller lowered his weapon slowly, his eyes never leaving his daughter's face. "Let her go, Crawford," he said, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. "This won't end well for you." "Shut up!" Crawford snapped, backing toward the street, dragging Catherine with him. I'm riding out of here, and she's coming with me until I'm safe. Anyone follows, she dies. Catherine's heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. Crawford's arm was locked around her throat, the pistol pressing painfully against her head. As he dragged her backward, she caught Thundercloud's eye. The Comanche warrior's expression was inscrutable, but something passed between them, an unspoken understanding. You won't get far, Sheriff Miller warned, taking a careful step forward. Stay back, Crawford shouted, his voice edged with panic. He continued backing up, his attention divided between the sheriff and the crowd. Catherine felt Crawford's grip shift slightly as he negotiated a step down from the boardwalk. In that instant, she made her move. Remembering what her father had taught her years ago, she drove her elbow hard into Crawford's ribs while simultaneously stamping down on his instep with all her strength. Crawford howled in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Catherine to twist away. As she dove to the ground, a blur of movement caught her eye. Thundercloud had launched himself forward with lightning speed, tackling Crawford before he could recover his aim. The two men crashed to the dirt road, Crawford's pistol discharging harmlessly into the air. They grappled fiercely, but Thundercloud's youth and strength quickly overcame the older man. Within moments he had pinned Crawford face down in the dust, one knee pressed firmly between his shoulder blades. Sheriff Miller rushed forward, quickly securing Crawford's hands with iron cuffs. Jeb Crawford, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Arthur Wilkins, theft, and the attempted kidnapping of my daughter. As Crawford was hauled to his feet, his face a mask of hatred and defeat, the crowd that had come for blood now murmured in shock and shame. Thundercloud stood quietly, his eyes finding Catherine's as she was helped to her feet by Deputy Simmons. Are you all right? He asked softly. Catherine nodded, still catching her breath. Yes, thank you. Sheriff Miller approached them, his expression a complex mixture of pride, relief, and residual anger. You took a terrible risk, he said to his daughter. Both of you did. It was the only way, Father, Catherine replied. Crawford would never have confessed otherwise. The sheriff turned to Thundercloud. I owe you an apology. And my thanks for saving my daughter. Thundercloud nodded solemnly. No man should be judged by the color of his skin, but by his actions. Sheriff Miller extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Thundercloud clasped it firmly. Around them, the townspeople watched in silent witness to a moment that would be remembered long after the excitement of the night had faded, a moment of justice transcending the prejudices that had nearly led to tragedy. As the crowd dispersed, and Crawford was led away to the very cell he had tried to force open, Catherine knew that Broken Ridge would never be quite the same again. The frontier was changing, slowly and painfully, one act of courage at a time. The morning after Crawford's arrest dawned clear and bright over Broken Ridge. Catherine stood on the porch of her father's house, watching as the town slowly came to life. The events of the previous night had sent shockwaves through the community, and she could feel the curious glances directed her way as people passed by. Judge Elijah Preston arrived precisely at noon, his black carriage stirring dust along Main Street as it rolled to a stop outside the jailhouse. A tall, imposing figure with a neatly trimmed white beard, Preston had a reputation for fairness that was rare in frontier judiciary. Catherine watched from across the street as her father greeted the judge and led him inside. The trial would be held immediately, frontier style, in the town's small meeting hall. Catherine had been summoned to testify, along with Arthur Wilkins, Thundercloud, and several others who had witnessed the dramatic events. As she walked toward the hall, Thundercloud emerged from the jailhouse, escorted by Deputy Simmons. No longer a prisoner, he nevertheless remained under watch until the proceedings concluded. Their eyes met briefly across the dusty street, and Catherine felt a strange flutter in her chest at his slight nod of acknowledgement. The meeting hall filled quickly. Nearly everyone in Broken Ridge had come to witness the unusual trial. Crawford sat sullenly at one table, while Thundercloud was seated at another. Judge Preston took his place at the front, calling the improvised court to order with 3 sharp raps of his gavel. This court is now in session, he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly through the room. We are here to determine the guilt or innocence of Jeb Crawford, charged with the attempted murder of Arthur Wilkins, theft, and the attempted kidnapping of Catherine Miller. Crawford's head remained bowed, his expression hidden beneath the brim of his hat. We will also formally clear the name of the Comanche man known as Thundercloud, who was wrongfully accused of these crimes, Preston continued. Causing a murmur to ripple through the crowd. The proceedings moved swiftly. Arthur Wilkins, still weak but determined, testified first. His voice grew stronger as he recounted how Crawford had approached him near the creek, asking for directions before shooting him from behind. I recognized his voice, Wilkins stated firmly. And when I fell, I caught a glimpse of his face before everything went black. It was Jeb Crawford who shot me, not this Indian man. When it was Catherine's turn, she spoke clearly about the evidence. She had discovered the gold coin, the banknote, the piece of fabric matching Crawford's waistcoat. Judge Preston raised an eyebrow at her methods, but did not dismiss the evidence. While I cannot condone breaking into a man's quarters, Miss Miller, the judge remarked, your courage in pursuing justice is commendable. Thundercloud's testimony was perhaps the most impactful. He spoke simply and directly about finding Wilkins wounded and attempting to help him. Among my people, we do not leave a wounded man to die, even if he is an enemy, he explained. I was trying to stop the bleeding when Crawford's friends found me. They did not ask what happened. They saw only my skin and decided I was guilty. Throughout the testimony, Crawford remained silent, refusing to speak in his own defense. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and when Judge Preston finally delivered his verdict, no one in the room seemed surprised. Jeb Crawford, this court finds you guilty of all charges. You are hereby sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. The judge's gavel came down with finality. And let it be known that Thundercloud of the Comanche Nation is cleared of all suspicion in this matter. As Crawford was led away, the tension in the room gradually dissipated. People began to file out, some stopping to shake Thundercloud's hand or offer awkward apologies. Catherine stood off to the side, watching as her father approached the Comanche warrior. You're free to go, Sheriff Miller said, extending his hand. Though I'd understand if you want nothing more to do with our town after how you were treated. Thundercloud clasped the sheriff's hand firmly. Hatred comes from fear and ignorance. It is the same among my people. Perhaps what happened here can be a step toward understanding. That's a generous way of looking at it, Miller replied with a wry smile. You'd be welcome to stay in Broken Ridge if you've a mind to. Thundercloud glanced briefly toward Catherine before answering. I must return to my people first. They will be concerned for my safety, but perhaps I will return. As the crowd dispersed, Catherine approached Thundercloud, standing before him in the afternoon sunlight. She found herself suddenly shy, unsure what to say to this man who had shared such a profound experience with her. Will you really come back? She asked finally. Thundercloud studied her face for a long moment. Your people and mine have much to learn from each other. And I have never met anyone like you, Catherine Miller. A smile tugged at her lips. Is that a yes? It is a promise, he replied solemnly. When the moon is full again, I will return. Later. That afternoon, Catherine stood with her father at the edge of town, watching as Thundercloud rode north toward Comanche territory. The horse beneath him was a gift from Arthur Wilkins, a small token of gratitude that had been accepted with quiet dignity. Do you think things will change, Father? Catherine asked as the rider disappeared over a distant ridge. After what happened? Sheriff Miller sighed, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Change comes slowly to places like this, Catherine. One man's innocence won't erase years of fear and mistrust. But it's a beginning. Crawford had so many friends in town, Catherine mused. People who believed him without question. People believe what's comfortable, her father replied. It's easier to blame the stranger than to suspect your neighbor. He gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. You saw beyond that. Your mother would have been proud. The following weeks brought subtle changes to Broken Ridge. Arthur Wilkins recovered enough to return to his farm, where he hung a Comanche medicine pouch, a parting gift from Thundercloud, beside his door. Deputy Simmons could be seen studying a Comanche phrase book ordered from back east, and Judge Preston, before departing for his circuit, had recommended to the territorial governor that Thundercloud be appointed as an official liaison between the settlers and the Comanche people. Catherine threw herself into helping her father maintain order in the town. But as each day passed, she found herself glancing more frequently toward the northern horizon. When the full moon finally rose, casting its silver light over the plains, she sat on the porch late into the evening, waiting. It was nearly midnight when a lone rider appeared in the distance. Catherine stood, shading her eyes against the moonlight, her heart quickening as the figure drew closer. Thundercloud rode tall in the saddle, his silhouette unmistakable against the star-filled sky. "You came back," she said simply when he dismounted before her. Thundercloud nodded, a rare smile softening his features. "I keep my promises, Catherine Miller. And how long will you stay?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "That depends," he replied, his dark eyes holding hers steadily. "On what?" "On whether there is reason to stay." Catherine felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I think you might find several reasons," she said softly. "Broken Ridge is changing. Slowly, perhaps, but changing nonetheless." Thundercloud looked beyond her to the sleeping town, its windows dark except for the saloon and the jailhouse. "Change is like the river," he said thoughtfully. "It cannot be stopped, only guided." "Then stay and help guide it," Catherine suggested, her voice gaining confidence. "My father respects you. People listen to him. Together, you could make a difference here." For a long moment, Thundercloud was silent, considering her words. Finally, he nodded. "I will stay, for a time." As they walked together toward the jailhouse, where Sheriff Miller was completing his nightly rounds, Catherine felt a sense of hope unlike anything she'd experienced before. The road ahead would not be easy. Prejudice and mistrust ran deep on both sides, but tonight, under the full moon, anything seemed possible. Sheriff Miller looked up in surprise as they entered, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he recognized Thundercloud. "Well now," he said, rising from his desk, "looks like we've got ourselves a visitor." "Not a visitor," Catherine corrected gently. "A neighbor." Her father's eyebrows rose, but after a moment, he nodded, extended his hand once more to the Comanche warrior. "Welcome to Broken Ridge, Thundercloud, properly this time." As the two men shook hands, Catherine knew that the event set in. Motion by one man's greed and another's compassion had forever altered the course of their small frontier town. The chains of prejudice that had nearly cost an innocent man his life had begun to loosen, link by link. Outside, the full moon continued its journey across the night sky, casting its light impartially over settler and Comanche lands alike, illuminating a frontier that was changing, one brave heart at a time.